Have you ever wondered what it would be like to step into someone else's shoes for a day? To trade your life of privilege for one of struggle and hard work? That's exactly what Barron Trump did, and the results were more profound than anyone could have imagined. In this video, we'll take you on a journey that starts with a shocking decision and ends with tears of both joy and sorrow. You'll see firsthand how one person's choice to understand others can ripple out and touch countless lives. Barron Trump stood at the window of his penthouse, the glittering city below a stark contrast to the turmoil in his heart. For weeks, a restless feeling had been growing inside him, a nagging sense that he was missing something crucial about the world beyond his gilded walls. His privileged life, once a source of comfort, now felt suffocating. He couldn't shake the memory of a chance encounter during a recent school visit. A boy with worn shoes and determined eyes had approached him, sharing a story of struggle and perseverance that left Barron stunned. The boy's words echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of a world he knew nothing about. That night, sleep eluded Barron. He tossed and turned, wrestling with a radical idea that wouldn't let him go. By morning, his mind was made up. He would do something his family would never understand or approve of. With trembling hands, he picked up his phone and made a call that would change everything. "Hello, I'm calling about the janitor position at Lincoln High," Barron said, his voice barely above a whisper. He gave a fake name, John Smith, and arranged an interview for later that day. As he hung up, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursed through him. Barron's next challenge was crafting a disguise that would keep his true identity hidden. He raided the back of his closet, pulling out the plainest clothes he owned. A pair of wire-rimmed glasses, a cheap baseball cap, and some temporary hair dye completed the transformation. Standing before the mirror, he barely recognized himself. As he packed a small duffel bag with his new uniform, Barron's mind raced. How would he explain his absence to his family? What if someone recognized him? But beneath the worry, there was an undeniable thrill. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was about to do something truly meaningful. Barron slipped out of Trump Tower unnoticed, blending into the morning crowd. As he made his way to Lincoln High, he rehearsed his backstory. John Smith, 18 years old, recent high school graduate looking to earn money before college. It wasn't entirely false. He was using his real age and education level. The lies made him uncomfortable, but he knew they were necessary. The school stood before him, a weathered brick building that had seen better days. Barron took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy front doors. The halls were quiet, most students still in class. He made his way to the main office, his heart pounding. "John Smith?" the secretary called. "Mr. Rodriguez will see you now." Barron entered the small office, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. Mr. Rodriguez, the head custodian, looked up from his desk. His weathered face broke into a kind smile. "Have a seat, son," he said, gesturing to a chair. "So, you want to be a janitor?" Barron nodded, willing his voice to remain steady. "Yes, sir. I'm a hard worker, and I'm willing to learn." Mr. Rodriguez studied him for a moment. "It's not glamorous work, you know. Long hours, tough messes. You sure you're up for it?" "I am," Barron replied, surprising himself with his own conviction. "I want to make a difference, even if it's just keeping the school clean and safe for the students." Something in his words seemed to resonate with Mr. Rodriguez. The older man's eyes softened. "All right, John, let's give you a try. You start Monday. Be here at 6 a.m. sharp." As Barron left the office, clutching his new work schedule, the reality of what he'd done began to sink in. He, Barron Trump, was about to become a janitor at an inner-city high school. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges he couldn't even imagine. But for the first time in a long time, he felt alive. As Barron stepped into the school's dimly lit hallway, the weight of his decision hit him like a ton of bricks. The mop felt foreign in his hands, its wooden handle rough against his soft palms. He'd never cleaned anything in his life, let alone an entire school. How would the son of a billionaire fare in a job that demanded grit, humility, and hard work? The supply closet was a far cry from the pristine spaces he was accustomed to. The musty smell of cleaning products assaulted his nostrils as he fumbled with the mop and bucket. Water sloshed over the sides, creating puddles at his feet. Barron's heart raced as he realized he had no idea how to even begin his first task. As he awkwardly pushed the mop across the floor, leaving streaks and missed spots in his wake, the sound of laughter echoed down the hallway. A group of students rounded the corner, their eyes widening at the sight of the new janitor struggling with the most basic of cleaning tasks. "Hey, new guy. You missed a spot. Actually, you missed the whole floor," one of the students called out, eliciting more laughter from his friends. Barron's face burned with embarrassment. He felt exposed, vulnerable, and completely out of his depth. For a moment, he considered dropping the mop and running back to the safety of his penthouse. But then, unbidden, the image of that determined student he'd met months ago flashed in his mind. Those eyes, full of resilience and hope despite the challenges, gave Barron a renewed sense of purpose. Taking a deep breath, he gripped the mop tighter and started again. His movements were still clumsy, but there was a newfound determination in each stroke. The students, perhaps sensing his resolve, moved on without further comment. As the day wore on, Barron's body protested against the unfamiliar labor. His arms ached from scrubbing stubborn stains. His back screamed as he bent to pick up trash, and his feet throbbed from hours of standing. Yet, with each completed task, a strange sense of accomplishment began to grow. He watched as muddy footprints disappeared under his mop, leaving behind gleaming floors. Graffiti-covered bathroom stalls transformed under his careful scrubbing. Even the windows seemed to shine a little brighter after his inexperienced but earnest efforts. By the time the final bell rang, Barron was exhausted beyond anything he'd ever experienced. His disguise, the plain clothes and dyed hair, felt like a second skin now, covered in a day's worth of honest work and sweat. As he collapsed onto a chair in the janitor's break room, muscles screaming in protest, he felt a newfound respect for the invisible labor that kept places like this running. Mr. Johnson, the head custodian, entered the room and gave Barron an appraising look. "Not bad for your first day, kid," he said with a nod. "You've got a lot to learn, but you didn't quit. That's something." Those simple words of acknowledgement felt more valuable to Barron than any praise he'd received in his privileged life. He realized that here, in this struggling school, his worth would be measured not by his name or his father's wealth, but by the effort he put in and the impact he made. Barron's eyes darted nervously around the cramped break room as he unwrapped his simple sandwich. The unfamiliar scent of industrial cleaning products clung to his clothes, a constant reminder of his new reality. He'd spent days avoiding small talk, terrified that one wrong word might shatter his carefully constructed facade. But as he sat alone in the corner, a sense of isolation threatened to overwhelm him. The scrape of a chair made Barron flinch. He looked up to see an older man settling into the seat beside him, his weathered face creased with a gentle smile. "Mind if I join you, kid?" the man asked, his voice rough but kind. "Name's Carl. You must be the new guy." Barron nodded, swallowing hard. "John," he managed, remembering his alias. "John Smith." Carl chuckled, unwrapping his own lunch. "Well, John Smith, welcome to the glamorous world of custodial arts." His eyes twinkled with good humor, and Barron found himself relaxing slightly. As they ate, Carl shared stories of his decades at Westside High. He spoke of stubborn stains conquered, of midnight emergencies involving burst pipes and flooded hallways. But more than that, he talked about the students, their triumphs, their struggles, and the small ways he'd found to make their days a little brighter. Barron listened, fascinated. He'd never considered how much a janitor might see and understand about a school's inner workings. Hesitantly, he began to ask questions, careful to frame them as though he came from a modest background. "It ain't always easy," Carl admitted, his expression growing serious. "Some days you'll wonder why you bother, but then you'll see a kid notice how clean their classroom is, or you'll overhear a teacher say how much they appreciate our work. Those moments, they make it all worthwhile." As Carl spoke, Barron felt something shift inside him. He'd embarked on this journey seeking understanding, but he'd never expected to find a mentor in this unassuming man. Carl's words painted a picture of a world where small acts of service could ripple outward, touching lives in ways both seen and unseen. You know, Carl said, leaning in conspiratorially, I've been doing this job for 30 years, and I still learn something new every day. It's all about keeping your eyes and heart open. Barron nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He thought of the opulent rooms he'd left behind, realizing how little he truly knew about the world beyond his gilded cage. Here, in this dingy break room, he felt more seen and understood than he ever had in the glittering galas of his previous life. As the break ended and they stood to leave, Carl gave Barron's shoulder a supportive squeeze. "We've all got to start somewhere, kid," he said warmly. "You'll do just fine." Watching Carl shuffle back to work, Barron felt a surge of determination. He'd come here seeking answers, but he was beginning to realize that the real lessons lay in the connections he was forming. With renewed purpose, he grabbed his mop and headed back into the hallway, ready to face whatever challenges awaited him. The bustling hallways of Westside High became a familiar rhythm to Barron as the weeks passed. The squeaky wheels of his cleaning cart no longer drew stares, and he found himself blending into the background of school life. But as he faded from view, a new world came into focus. He noticed the small dramas that unfolded daily: the nervous freshman fumbling with his locker combination, the shy glances between two students who clearly liked each other, the triumphant fist pump of a girl who aced her math test. These moments, once invisible to him, now painted a vivid picture of the school's beating heart. One afternoon, as Barron was mopping near the guidance counselor's office, a conversation drifted through the partially open door. The counselor's voice was filled with concern as she spoke about a student named Melissa. "She's on the verge of dropping out," the counselor sighed. "Her family's struggling, and she feels like she needs to work full-time to help out. I'm worried we're going to lose her." The words hit Barron like a punch to the gut. He found himself scanning the hallways in the days that followed, wondering which face belonged to Melissa. When he finally spotted her, it was like a jolt of electricity. She stood by her locker, shoulders slumped, eyes distant and filled with a weariness that seemed far beyond her years. Without thinking, Barron wheeled his cart closer. As he pretended to clean the nearby drinking fountain, he mustered the courage to speak. "Hey," he said softly. "Rough day?" Melissa looked up, startled. For a moment, Barron thought she might just walk away. But then something in her eyes shifted and the words began to pour out. She told him about her mom's illness, the mounting medical bills, and the crushing weight of responsibility she felt. "I just don't see how I can do it all," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Barron listened, his heart aching. He thought of the opulent world he'd left behind, of the struggles he'd never known. In that moment, the distance between his two lives felt immeasurable. Yet here was Melissa, bearing her soul to a janitor she barely knew, simply because he'd taken the time to ask. "I know it feels impossible right now," Barron said carefully. "But you're stronger than you think. And your education, it's not just for you. It's a way to build a better future for your whole family." Melissa looked at him, a glimmer of something, hope, maybe, in her eyes. "You really think so?" Barron nodded, a fierce determination growing inside him. "I do, and I bet there are people here who want to help if you let them." As Melissa walked away, looking just a little lighter, Barron felt a shift within himself. He'd come here seeking understanding, but now he realized that wasn't enough. He needed to make a difference. That night, sleep eluded him. His mind raced with ideas, possibilities, and questions. How could he help Melissa without revealing his true identity? What resources could he connect her with? And how many other students were silently struggling, just like her? The moonlit halls of Westside High echoed with the rhythmic sloshing of Barron's mop. Shadows danced along the walls as he worked. A faint glow caught his eye, spilling from beneath the door of the teacher's lounge. Curiosity drew him closer. Through the glass panel, Barron spotted Ms. Rodriguez, the English teacher, hunched over a desk. Her shoulders slumped with exhaustion, dark circles visible under her eyes. He rapped softly on the door. Ms. Rodriguez's head snapped up, startled. "Oh, John," she said, using Barron's alias. "I didn't realize anyone else was here." "Is everything okay?" Barron asked, stepping into the room. Ms. Rodriguez hesitated, then gestured at the mountain of essays before her. "Just trying to keep up," she said with a hollow laugh. "These need to be graded by tomorrow, and I haven't even started on next week's lesson plans." As they talked, Ms. Rodriguez opened up about her challenges. She spoke of overcrowded classrooms, outdated textbooks, and students struggling with issues beyond English literature. Her voice cracked as she described using her own salary to buy classroom supplies. "I work 2 other jobs just to make ends meet," she confessed, eyes glistening. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm making any difference at all." Barron listened, his heart heavy. He thought of his own privileged education, the resources he'd taken for granted. For a moment, he almost revealed his true identity, wanting to offer more help. But he caught himself, remembering his mission. As the night wore on, Barron shared carefully edited stories from his own life. He spoke of feeling disconnected, of wanting to understand others' struggles. Ms. Rodriguez listened with genuine interest, offering words of encouragement that touched him deeply. Together, they tackled the essays, discussing the students' work. Barron gained insight into each young mind's potential and challenges. As dawn broke, Ms. Rodriguez looked up from the last essay, a genuine smile gracing her tired features. "Thank you, John," she said softly. "You have no idea how much this meant to me." Barron nodded, unable to express the profound impact this night had on him. As he left, his mind whirled with newfound respect for educators like Ms. Rodriguez and a burning desire to make a difference. Barron stood frozen in the hallway, his heart pounding as he overheard a heated conversation in the principal's office. The voices inside were tense, filled with frustration and despair. As he listened, the gravity of the situation became clear. Westside High was facing devastating budget cuts that would eliminate essential programs and staff positions. The principal's voice cracked with emotion as she explained the dire consequences. "We'll have to cut the after-school tutoring program, the art classes, and even some of our special education support. I don't know how we're going to tell the students and their families." Barron's mind raced, thinking of all the lives that would be affected. He thought of Carl, the kind-hearted janitor who had become a friend and mentor. Would he lose his job after 30 years of dedication? And Ms. Rodriguez, the English teacher who was already stretched to her limits, working multiple jobs to make ends meet. How would she cope with even more responsibilities? Images flashed through Barron's mind. The struggling students he'd encouraged, the friendships he'd formed, the lives he'd seen transformed. He remembered Melissa, the bright young girl on the verge of dropping out to help her family. Without the support of the school's programs, what chance did she have of building a better future? The air around him seemed to shift as the weight of the moment settled on his shoulders. For weeks, he had been living a double life, experiencing firsthand the challenges and triumphs of this community. Now, faced with its potential destruction, Barron knew he couldn't stand by and watch it crumble. With shaking hands, he reached for his phone. The number he dialed was one he never thought he'd use in this context. As the line connected, Barron took a deep breath, tears streaming down his face as the full impact of his decision hit him. "Dad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's me. I need your help." What happened next was a blur of explanations and revelations. Barron poured out everything: his undercover job as a janitor, the people he'd met, the lessons he'd learned, and the crisis the school now faced. His father listened in stunned silence. "I know it's a lot to ask," Barron said, his voice gaining strength. "But these people, this school, they deserve a chance. We have the resources to make a difference. Please, Dad, help me save Westside High." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, his father's voice, filled with a mix of pride and concern, came through. "Barron, I don't know what to say. This is unexpected, to say the least. But if this is truly what you want, if you believe in this cause so strongly, then yes, we'll help. Relief washed over Barron, but he knew this was just the beginning. With renewed determination, he knocked on the principal's door. As he entered, the room fell silent, all eyes turning to the young janitor they knew as John Smith. "I have something important to tell you," Barron began, his heart racing. "My name isn't John. It's Barron Trump, and I think I have a solution to our budget problem." The room erupted in gasps and exclamations of disbelief. But as Barron explained his story and his plan, the atmosphere shifted from shock to cautious hope. He pledged to use his family's resources to save the school's programs, to create a foundation that would ensure long-term support for Westside High and other schools like it. The auditorium buzzed with a mixture of excitement and confusion as students and staff filed in for an unexpected assembly. Whispers and theories bounced off the walls, each person speculating about the mysterious benefactor who had seemingly saved their beloved programs from devastating budget cuts. The air crackled with anticipation as Principal Thompson approached the microphone, her face a mask of carefully controlled emotion. "Students and faculty of Westside High," she began, her voice steady but tinged with an undercurrent of something more. "We've gathered here today to address the recent rumors and to introduce someone very special." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Someone who has been among us, learning and growing alongside us, all while harboring an extraordinary secret." A collective intake of breath rippled through the audience as a figure emerged from the wings. Gone was the familiar janitor's uniform, replaced by a crisp button-down shirt and slacks. As he stepped into the light, gasps of recognition echoed throughout the room. It was John Smith, but it wasn't. The brown dye had been washed from his hair, revealing the unmistakable golden locks of Barron Trump. For a moment, Barron stood frozen, his eyes wide as he faced the sea of shocked faces. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional murmur of disbelief. In the back of the auditorium, Carl the janitor stood with his arms crossed, a proud smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Ms. Rodriguez, seated in the front row, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her expression a mixture of surprise and understanding. Barron's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edges of the podium, but when he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the hushed room. "For the past few months," he began, "I've been living a double life. You've known me as John Smith, the new janitor, but the truth is, I'm Barron Trump." The revelation sent a ripple of murmurs through the crowd, but Barron pressed on, his voice growing stronger with each word. He spoke of his privileged upbringing, of the growing unease he'd felt, and of the fateful school visit that had sparked his journey. As he recounted his experiences at Westside High, the challenges, the friendships, the eye-opening moments, sniffles and quiet sobs could be heard throughout the auditorium. "I came here thinking I could understand your world," Barron said, his voice thick with emotion. "But you've taught me so much more than I ever expected. You've shown me the true meaning of perseverance, of community, of hope in the face of adversity." He spoke of Melissa, whose story had touched him deeply, and of Ms. Rodriguez's tireless dedication to her students. With each anecdote, more tears were shed, not just by the students and staff, but by Barron himself. The weight of his deception lifted, replaced by the warmth of shared understanding. As Barron's story unfolded, the initial shock in the room gave way to something else, a palpable sense of connection and shared purpose. He spoke of his late-night conversation with Ms. Rodriguez, of the stark realities he'd witnessed, and of the moment he knew he had to take action. "I realized," Barron said, his voice gaining strength, "that I had been given an incredible opportunity, not just to learn, but to make a real difference." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "That's why I'm here today, to announce the creation of the Westside Foundation, dedicated to supporting underfunded schools across the country." The auditorium erupted in cheers and applause, the sound washing over Barron like a wave. As the noise died down, he concluded his speech with a heartfelt plea. "I ask you now to join me in this mission. Together, we can ensure that every student, regardless of their background, has the chance to reach their full potential." As Barron's journey concluded, Westside High experienced a profound shift. His actions inspired students to organize regular community service days and mentorship programs. Years later, the school became known for its inclusive culture and outreach initiatives, a testament to the power of empathy and action. Barron's story challenges us all. What would happen if you spent a day in someone else's shoes? Look around your community. Who's struggling? What small step can you take today to make a difference? Remember, understanding often comes from unexpected places. It's time to step outside your comfort zone and create positive change.